radicalizing, indoctrinating children is totally acceptable in the Palestinian society. And of course, decade after decade, people die. And children become terrorists. Children become suicide bombers. And instead of realizing that this is a vicious cycle, can never end, they praise suicide bombing. They praise violence. They don't look at the root cause, which is the spread of sick ideologies that is threat to any society, not only the Palestinian society. Before it was Palestinian society, it's an Arab society. But Palestinianism is basically an ideology. It's a religion of a kind, a belief system. And they brainwashed everyone. I was supposed to die for that cause. Nobody ever told me that my ethnicity was an Arab. They wanted us to be Palestinians, even though Palestine never existed. They wanted us to believe that there is occupation and we were supposed to fight until death for the sake of the cause. So I ended up in prison. I lost my family. And look today, 15 years later, after I left the region, it's a total destruction of Gaza, total destruction. And instead for the Palestinians to have a full pause, to stop and evaluate the entire thing, they continue to blame, they continue to ignore the process of indoctrination and radicalization. So now, in the shadow of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, this is just the beginning. And this is what I've been warning, as an American. For 15 years now, my book came out. I got shunned by my family as outcome. I was not seeking fame. I left all my security, fame, honor, power behind in the Middle East. And I moved to the United States for one thing, my freedom. And when I expressed myself to say this is the reality of Hamas, the mainstream media immediately canceled me because I criticized Islam. And that was the taboo, and is still the taboo today. They tried everything within their ability to silence me. And here we go. Now America is becoming vulnerable to the Hamas, Palestinian, communist, jihadi, Islamist ideologies flooding social media from China, from Russia, from North Korea, from the devil. Only God knows. 30% of the social media activity is run by state-sponsored bots that flood the internet, and people start believing that it's reality because many people are agreeing. But they don't realize that this is all computerized stuff. And now humans adapted the lie, the indoctrination, the false narrative, the victim narrative, most importantly. Even though I made it very clear over the years that the victim mentality is a very dangerous virus, and it's against the American spirit that depends on resilience. These people want everybody to become a victim. They don't people to fight the good fight for freedom. And now they are criminalizing everybody who speaks against it. We are aware of the tragedy of Gaza. We are aware that children are dying. We are aware of the bloodshed. But how does it originate? They don't want to accept. They are in total denial. And this is the outcome. When you bring such victim narrative to the United States, in a generation that's totally confused and swayed by social media, that they don't know, and they don't have the power to discern false from true. Now, the reality that America or the new generation has been indoctrinated of ideologies that goes against the American spirit and the American values should not surprise anybody, and that more people would act on it and begin to use violence is a certain thing. This is just the beginning. And by the way, from the beginning of the war, I told, don't invite Palestinianism into the United States. It's a black hole. But nobody is listening. And sooner or later, we are going to deal with some deadly consequences. China and Russia, they're very clear about their goals of changing the world order. Unfortunately, communists, or let's say communism, which is considered, according to the CIA, the red danger, and Islamism, which is considered the green danger, these two dangers are opposing forces, first of all, to each other, then opposing forces to the capital model. Putin and Xi, they are determined to put the United States in the back seat. Today, they take advantage of the Palestinian trigger. Palestine is only a device. It's the Trojan Horse. And they have been paddling the flames of conflict to sabotage America, to divide America. They don't want America to lead. And they cannot have a much more destructive device than Palestine, even though Palestine is non-existential. It's a replacement. So this is the big game that most people are not paying attention to, but 10 years of counterterrorism experience as part of the Israeli intelligence is the biggest school of my life. And also my knowledge of the intelligence briefings that coming from NATO, coming from Europe, coming from the United States. Governments are aware of this danger. It's not a secret. But they don't know how to counter it. And this is what I said. Social media and AI is allowing them to transcend the political and cultural barriers, to indoctrinate spoiled kids who don't know better, and to recruit armies. Now the problem with with desperate social media wannabes who feed on the likes of money, and these people built empires out of this confused people, and they are not retreating. Even though you bring them the truths, the facts, they are just made up their mind on a certain truth that they don't want anyone to challenge it. And when we come to them and say, you have been working to push agendas that are very dangerous, that is targeting the American social fabric, the American security, the American spirit. The country is divided, and they just want to go on as long as they are making a career out of the tragedy of Gaza. They don't want to stop. Look, the honest truth, I wasn't on social media for about 10 years. I just recently, when the war started, I had to open some accounts so I can communicate with the public. It's like I was in a coma somehow. And I wake up on a reality where everything is done in the virtual realm. And of course, not only opportunists, there are also wolves among the sheep. Everybody is driven by a certain desire, whether if it's fame, money, power. There's lots of power when you have lots of followers right now. Everything is measured by how many followers do you have. It's not about how truthful you are. It's not about how experienced. Do you qualify to talk on the topic? None of these people been even to the territory or to Gaza to understand the culture. They took sides. At the beginning, they started as anti-war activists, which is legitimate. I cannot cancel their right to say ceasefire. But when they turned into anti-Israel activists generalizing and labeling the Jewish nation as genocidal, as colonizers, canceling their right to exist, demonizing, dehumanizing, and defaming. This is now a very, very dangerous take on the problem. Those who don't know the reality of the Middle East did not have the right to talk on the topic, but they did anyway. What's the outcome? More confusion, the spread of false narrative, and violence are connected in the Palestinian territories. When the lies start growing and more people start believing in it, the peaceful environment that I grew up in as a child was gone forever. The moment they start saying globalize the intifada, the moment Abdullah Azzam and the other Muslim Brotherhood jihadists brought their ideology, it became bloodbath, mass shootings, assassinations, chaos. They sabotaged economy, education, and within no time, suicide bombing. More than 100 suicide bombing during the Second Intifada. This is what Palestinians did, and this was way before October 7. So, false narrative, victimhood, very dangerous constructs. And this is the very foundation of Palestinianism and Palestine.
Is the civilian population living in fear, or is the civilian population in it with Hamas?
Look, there's so many things to study regarding this phenomena. For example, tribalism. The West cannot understand tribalism, especially when it's let's say pairing with jihadism. These two forces. The people are not fighting for land. The Hamas, the Palestinians, when they are driven by tribal vengeance, they are looking for revenge. They just want to inflict the maximum pain on their opponents. This mentality is not known in the West. Maybe at some point they will be behaving that way and burnt by the same fire. And this is why when we say those who lived in the conflict and express their experience, I'm not the only one. We are not many, but at least we reflect and project both cultures. I spent half of my life among what's so-called Palestinians, which is nothing but a false identity, and half of my life among the Jewish people. It's a very unique position. And I'm not posing as I'm the only one who qualified to talk on this, but I'm trying to navigate my way against so many currents of opportunists who are trying basically to just push their agendas driven by selfish desire and not knowing that this is how children die. They want to justify October 7 as an act of resistance. And we tell them, no, this is the barbarism of the 7th century. Just look at what's happened in Syria recently against the Druze, for example. Same scenarios, barbarism, burning people alive, killing women, raping, kidnapping. In 7th century mentality, tribes used to fight for 100 years until they annihilate their enemy or get annihilated. It's a culture.
Do you think...
my point is, when you bring tribalism, at least this is one dimension of this paradox. It's not everything. Infinite forces at play. The destruction of Gaza, it was not just a simple problem of indigenous people fighting for their land, and there are two forces, colonizers and indigenous people. There's so many forces at play, and this is why the destruction is total. Gaza is rubble today. Not because Israel wanted to do that, because there is no other way. If Gaza is not leveled to ground zero, it will continue to breed terrorism. Today, jihadists, tomorrow, communists, and the next day could be socialists. This is the breeding ground that has been going on for about 70 years, and so many foreign entities, from the Islamic Republic to Russia to Egypt to the Arab League to the Muslim countries to the oil money. Even today, we have Americans and Europeans who have been exploiting the tragedy. How it will never end. And you cannot satisfy their ambition because they're not one force. I wish they were just an ethnic group with a purpose, that they say, okay, we want this piece of land and we want to establish a nation on it. They were given a land back in 1948, and they've been given a land again and again, opportunity to build a nation, to build a state. But they refused. Their focus has been the destruction of the Jewish state, that they refuse and reject the right for Israel and Jewish people to exist in the region. So there's so many things we can talk about. Is it jealousy? Israel, for example, hardworking people, successful minority. Their culture is based on education. They praise diversity. They are driven by life. While the other society is jealous. They're given the best part of the land, for your information, the best part of the land, and they failed to develop it. Now they want to go dominate the other part, the other side of the river, the greener side. Why? Because it's developed. Why? Because there is freedom. Women are free. The beaches are thriving. The economy is thriving. So now here comes the human condition as well. It's not only hate, it's also jealousy, it's delusion, it's human conditioning based on myth of the 7th century, tribalism, and add to that all the foreign entities trying to settle their score and making the children pay the price. I can go on and on forever. You cannot, it's so elusive and it has so many sides. This is why I am totally against this vessel called Palestine. It's a very, very dangerous trigger. And if the people don't wake up, it is not going to be only the destruction of Gaza. It would be the destruction of Europe and possibly the destruction of the United States.
And there has been a debate in America going back to 9/11 about whether Islamic radicalism of the kind that we've seen in Al-Qaeda, we've seen with ISIS, we've seen it with Islamic Jihad, is all of that a natural product of Islam, or is it a deviant spin-off of Islam that is out of the true spirit of Islam? What do you say?
Look, this is the dangerous zone that nobody wants to enter. Why? First of all, Muslims are a majority. When we talk about 25% of the population of Earth, this is not just a small minority.
Right.
And they are very powerful because behind them is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Persian Gulf money, the Islamic Republic. They have been buying the West. That includes property. That includes politicians. When a small country like Qatar, but very wealthy, owns 10% of the French bonds or trust, do you want to convince me that they don't have influence when it comes to the French politics? And they pose as a moderate Muslim country, while basically they are sponsoring Hamas, spreading the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, and selling the West through their Al Jazeera a peaceful version of Islam that does not exist. let's say the vast majority of Muslims, they don't agree with the Islamic barbarism. And when I say barbarism, why? Because in Quran, and this is the highest authority in Islam, it's the word of Allah, and it functions as legislation. This is what inspires jihadists. Jihadists did not misinterpret Islam. They understand Islam completely. So the vast majority of Muslims identify with something that they completely oppose because it's basically their birth identity. But it's a religious identity, just like Palestinianism. It's not an ethnicity. It's not a race. And because of this financial influence in the West of Arab oil money, they silenced everybody. Anybody who tried to criticize Islam, they get canceled. For example, it was part of my work after I published my books to go on campuses and speak to the students based on my first-hand experience. And I didn't know why I was canceled from campuses. Today, we realize that Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other oil Arab countries and Muslim countries control campuses because they are big donors. And how to bring someone who actually broke free from Islam on campus to criticize Islam? Then they would piss off their donors. And now they compromise the truth. Instead of educational institutions, how many people came out of Islam and lost everything, put their life on the line? Instead of listening, I studied the Sharia, I studied the Quran, I grew up among Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, which are now functioning as a threat to civilization and to the global security. Are you kidding me that I did not qualify at least to have a podium or a platform to express my first-hand experience? What kind of universities would cancel me just because of my speech? And I did not mean to offend the Muslims. They labeled me immediately as Islamophobic, even though I was brought up in Islam. So what's the outcome of this? Radicalization, and this is how they keep spreading their hateful ideologies against the West while they have the cover of being a peaceful religion. I have a duty towards the Muslim people. And yes, I need to wake them up because they are drunk and deeply asleep. They are identifying with something that is not them. But everybody is trying to get along. And this is not the way. In Christianity, everybody's criticizing Christianity. You criticize Judaism, no problem, it's not a crime. But dare to criticize Islam. And as long as we have not overcome this barrier that is basically created by Arab and Islamic influential states that now control compromised politicians in the West, as long as we don't realize this, they will continue to invade the West to the point where they would bleed the West from its values, from its ethics, and leave us like literally a skeleton. Look, this was not my first time I faced the mob or the crowd.
Yeah,
I've done it a lot since very, very young age. I used to jump on the table in the cafeteria in our college and confront everybody. It was of the same nature. And suddenly, when I went to Oxford, I prepared something. It was completely different than what I talked about. When I came there, I realized that there was Ramallah again, of the same mentality. Just so many victims, so many angry people, but they don't know why they are angry. They're not there to listen. They are there to insult us. There were just a handful of us. And we had against us hundreds of students out, actually students inside the chamber, but also we had a lot more outside who were like literally getting in our way, threatening our lives. And we did not have security. The college did not provide security. They did not have order. It was a mob. We didn't know who were those people, if they were students or something else. So how to expect from someone, handling such a mob? It's a mob. Nobody came there for truth. And under a life-threatening circumstances. It was very, very sad and shocking for me. But I needed to speak anyway, regardless of their intimidation. Sooner or later, they will have to drink from the same cup, these people. Now they are young, they are naive, they think that they have figured out the truth. They have no experience. But sooner or later, they're going to hit a dead end, or they're going to just realize the outcome of their creation. Because civilization is not going to continue the same. If this is the elite, supposedly the future leaders, and this is how they're thinking already. I came from the depth of Hamas, and so many people in the Middle East want me dead to oppose their extremism, to oppose their violence. All I did, I said no to suicide bombing attacks that targeted civilians indiscriminately. And they said, this is treason. And they put a death sentence over my head. Today, in the West, so many people agreeing with this. And they have been parroting Hamas accusations and the Palestinian accusations. So if we want to crucify those who fought on behalf of humanity to save human lives, and we want to sentence them to death, or at least we want to validate such a verdict issued by a barbaric group like Hamas, this means that we have reached a rock bottom. There was no point at Oxford Union or any other college to actually rationalize with such mentality when they are pointing gun, validating literally a death sentence over my head. How can I rationalize with people like this? There is nothing to talk about. There is no room for dialogue. And the more you try to speak to them rationally, make yourself vulnerable, bring your first-hand experience, which is, in my case, is full of pain and bloodshed. They take advantage of your vulnerability. And this is what I don't like. Hence, I confront. Because it's too late to convince anybody. The situation is boiling. Civilization at the verge of collapse. The world as we know it is coming to an end. And we are going full speed. And all these maniacs spreading dangerous indoctrination on a steroid. So what are you expecting from me? Or what public expecting? I used to speak rational some 15 years ago, but nobody listened. And when I came after October 7, it was already too late, and Hamas took over. These people are very, very dangerous. Their ideology is very dangerous. And they have been working freely to radicalize the West. Europe is at the verge of collapse. It has been invaded. An invasion doesn't mean necessarily armies invading. And when I say the collapse doesn't mean necessarily an attack or terrorist attack on the American or European soil. I'm afraid of a civil war which would lead to implosion, where everything is going to collapse. At that time, you will not find Oxford, you will not find colleges. Possibly we would be rattled by famines and violence and drought and disease. Because the very foundations of the Western civilization is liberty, freedom, and all the ethics that keeps the West thriving. And now they are emptying it from its essence and replacing it with Middle Eastern jihadi ideology. Look, Hamas knew and expected the Israeli retaliation. They expected a ground operation. They took hostages and they used their children, women as human shields. They weaponized civilians, expecting that Israel, the civilian casualty is going to be very high in one of the most populated areas on earth. It's not a new strategy. Hamas did it already 4 times in the past. And every time they realized that Israel got delegitimized. And the global pressure orchestrated by the Arab oil money, pushing through the United Nations and through compromised Western leaders. It worked for Hamas. This time, Hamas doubled down. In fact, they tripled down, thinking that the collateral damage is going to be much higher than the previous wars. And this time, Hamas would get legitimacy as a main player out of this war. They were expecting that they would make it out of the war. This is why they took the hostages. And this is why they used it. It was beyond their expectations that Israel would go this far in war. They expected from Israel to surrender on October 8th, to meet with their demands, release mass murderers, and accept terrorist group as a governing authority, and expected from the world to reward them with a statehood in order to calm the beast. But this did not work for Hamas this time. And the Israeli resilience against so many odds brought them now to corner. This is the game of Hamas that the world does not want to understand. Now, weaponizing civilians, there is no more dangerous weapon than this. When a society sacrifice their own children for political and financial gain, it's the most powerful weapon. There was no way in the world, there is no amount of explanation that any democracy can do to counter such lethal force, sacrificing children, putting children in harm's way so the children get hurt and the world would blame Israel as the perpetrator, forgetting about how things originated. And even those who remember October 7, today they have been repeating the Palestinian narrative that say, no, Israel is an occupier, and October 7 was a legitimate resistance act. Which brings us back to the very foundations of the Palestinian narrative, that Palestine never existed. It is not occupied. And Palestinians are not indigenous of the land. And they are not fighting for land anyway, because they have been given a land. But they refuse Israel's right to exist. And October 7 is not an outcome of occupation. It's an outcome of the exploitation of infinite forces that have been working for 77 years to sabotage the Jewish state, because it's a very sensitive conflict, especially with the Jewish influence as a successful minority worldwide. So this type of entities, they understand what it means to intervene and manipulate the Middle Eastern conflict, especially the Israeli-Arab conflict. So there is no amount of explanation, there is no amount of books or material that can convince the average person that what's happening in Gaza is an evil practice inspired by a barbaric culture coming from the 7th century that is willing to kidnap infants and is willing to sacrifice as many children as it takes for eternity until the point of annihilation for the sake of revenge.
There are lots of people who live in other countries and they can't automatically demand a state, but in this case, you have this group of people that is affirming a kind of national identity. We are Palestinians. Is that what you mean when you say that Palestinianism is a kind of a fiction?
It's a made-up identity. And it's so elusive that could mean anything. Because anybody can just put on a keffiyeh and become a Palestinian. You know, Yasser Arafat, the creator of, or let's say the father of the Palestinian revolution, was an Egyptian man. His birth certificate said on it, Egyptian. Hamas leaders from Sinwar to Haniya, their birth certificates said on it, Egyptians. When I was born, my birth certificate said on it, Jordanian. The West Bank belonged to Jordan. It did not belong to something used to be known as Palestine. Palestine was never a sovereign state, and Palestinians are not nation. It's a political movement. And even when Yasser Arafat was asked once after he declared independence in 1988, he was asked, what is Palestine? What is the border? What are the borders? He said, Palestine is wherever there are Palestinians. So he did not even define the borders. And today we have a new generation of Palestinians worldwide who identify with the victim narrative, mostly self-inflicted trauma, self-inflicted catastrophe that is inspired by violence. And it's in their interest to keep the cycle of violence moving. They don't want to break it because there's so many people and forces who have been exploiting this tragedy. And every time, if it was only between the Arabs and the Jews, the problem would have been solved long time ago, 77 years ago. That was the proposal by the United Nations. Let's divide the land, this part for the Arabs, and by the way, as I told you earlier, it was the better part, the more fertile soil. But the Arabs refused that. The problem was between Israel and Arab countries. There was no Palestine at all. But then the Palestinian identity was born when the PLO was founded in 1964. And shortly after, Yasser Arafat used the keffiyeh, which is an Iraqi symbol coming from Kufa, and it became the symbol of Palestinians. He took a Jordanian flag and removed the star from it, and it became Palestinian flag. It never existed before, and posed only as a hostile movement to replace Israel, not to build a nation that can thrive and prosper in peace, in peaceful relationship to Israel. So I can go on and on forever about this falsehood. And now it's their struggle. And again, as I said, it's nothing but self-inflicted trauma, self-inflicted catastrophe that they keep just repeating again and again. And Gaza is only the last chapter in their comic book. So when you have a people who don't have regard to their children, and their entire focus is the cause and the continuation of this angry cause, I don't have respect for these people. I don't care what type of identity. Even if they were a legitimate ethnic group, I still have a problem with them. You know, in Israel, the entire nation protect the children. It's a priority. Why Israel was broken on October 7? Because the Jewish people saw Jewish children being kidnapped, infants, and babies being burnt to death, women raped. This is why the country was, there is no way as a nation to coexist with these people. Israel, in good faith, allowed Yasser Arafat and the other Palestinians to come from outside in good faith, hoping that this would solve the conflict. But when they returned in Oslo some 33 years ago, instead of peace, they turned it into a bloodbath. So Palestinians, they are invaders. We are not Palestinians. When I was born, there was nothing written on my forehead says Palestinian. My ethnicity is Arabic. My language is Arabic. Our culture is Arabic. If we qualify to anything, we qualify as Arabs. But Palestinians, this is something coming from Russia, from China, from the Islamic Republic, from jihadis, from communists, and now by clout seekers in the United States. Anybody can be a Palestinian. And so many people today worldwide identifying as Palestinians. And I don't know what really can satisfy their ambitions, especially when they are in their nature conflicted. If they did not have a common enemy, Israel, they would kill each other. Communists and jihadists, totally opposing each other. They can never meet. But when they found in Israel as a common enemy, they work together. Take this common enemy, they would destroy each other. So, what is Palestinian? This is one of the biggest questions of our time. And the self-proclaimed Palestinians, apparently, those are the ones who sit in comfort. Those are the ones who sit abroad, expecting from children, not only Gaza children, but also Jewish children, to pay the bills of their greed.
My question is this. If Hamas were to, let's just say we could somehow just subtract Hamas from Gaza, remove all the Hamas influence from Gaza, isn't it true that Gaza would still be a highly toxic and dysfunctional society even without Hamas?
As I told you earlier, Gaza is a breeding ground. Even if Hamas is removed, tomorrow there will be another radical group. Maybe today they are Islamists or jihadists. Tomorrow we will be dealing with communists who could be a lot more dangerous than jihadists and a lot more sophisticated in their warfare. And we can never end. What's happening in Gaza right now, I think, is really important. An entire society has been hijacked by terrorists, regardless of their ideology. They all agree that the society must fight to death. Their goal is to destroy Israel, not to build a Palestinian state. So what can we do? Just allow such radicals, such terrorists to continue this game? And how much bloodshed would satisfy their ambition? And let's say even if they succeeded in destroying Israel eventually, God forbids, will they stop there? Look what Palestinians did in Jordan. Look what Palestinians did in Lebanon. Wherever they go, and again, Palestinians not as an ethnic group, Palestinian ideologists who basically, and in most cases, are anti-establishment. Palestine does not stand for order. It stands for chaos. And the Palestinians love chaos because this is the only place for them to thrive. I have studied the Palestinian Revolution and I have witnessed the Palestinian Revolution. It's a revolution for the sake of revolution. It's not a revolution for the sake of a statehood. Statehood, this is just a fancy idea. Resistance is a fancy idea, does not even belong to the region. There is no such thing in Arabic as resistance. It's an imported term from the Soviet. So where can they stop? And if I give them Israel, if I give them the land of Israel, the land of Syria, the land of America, do you think this type of mentality would actually run governments? They are incapable of forming a nation. They don't have any quality. They haven't qualified. I'm telling you about a savage society that has actually praised suicide bombers as martyrs and justify and legitimize the sacrifice of children, putting children in harm's way, the very foundation, the very basic of any society. How can I trust these people of being my neighbors? How can I trust these people with anything? And those Western leaders who want to just hand them a state, they think they are going to calm the beast. They are feeding the beast. They are rewarding terrorism, and they will ignite more chaos. You know, Lebanon was a very beautiful Christian country at some point. Before the Palestinians were pushed by the Jordanian king out of Jordan for the crimes that they committed in Jordan. The king invited them as guests, and within no time, Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians tried to overthrow the king. And the king did not want to kill them, so he expelled them. Where did they escape? They went to Lebanon. Lebanon was the Riviera of the Middle East, a Christian country, full of life, full of culture. Within no time, they turned Lebanon, especially Beirut, into rubble. 15 years of civil war. This is what the Palestinians did in Lebanon. And today, some Westerners are very excited about this new cause that they're just importing. It has the capacity of turning Europe, the United States, into rubble. Not necessarily the same style they are doing here in the Middle East. It's just the victim narrative. It should not spread. The hateful indoctrination, the entitlement for revenge, the entitlement for compensation, especially when it's driven by jihad. Now it becomes by the name of Allah, not only by the name of nationalism. So who are they? And do they have a leadership? And what do they want in their revolution? All we witnessed throughout the revolution, that the revolutionary leaders become very rich, billionaires, and the poor children dwell in despair. And they keep people in ignorance as a breeding ground for their terrorism, because otherwise they are not going to find the human fuel or the human sacrifice necessary for the continuation of their endless cause. This is why I question their identity. And I know them firsthand. I wish they had a legitimate leadership. I wish they had a goal. I wish they had a moral compass. I wish they had at least a middle ground where Israel can meet with them and we can end it just through negotiations. But this is an entire society that is committing suicide, and this has to stop. I think everything affiliated with Palestine and Palestinianism must be studied and discussed freely, away from the tragedy of Gaza. The fact that I question Palestine and Palestinianism does not mean that I am canceling the tragedy and the self-inflicted catastrophe and the amount of bloodshed that happened in Gaza. This is something we need to put it on the side and think rationally. How is this problem originating? As long as we are believing the lie and the lie is spreading like wildfire, they are going to turn the rest of the world into Gaza rubble.
To fix this, it looks to me, if your diagnosis is correct, the propaganda is already built into the society, the children are indoctrinated, the parents are indoctrinated. It looks to me that something quite dramatic is needed to rebuild that society from the ground up. Do you agree? And what is that something that you would, if you were running it, how would you fix it?
Look, first of all, I don't have the capacity to really run such a society. And my suggestion for any force that is involved in this conflict, that Gaza, this giant refugee camp, was maintained by the United Nations, by all those who have been exploiting the conflict to keep the tragedy going, should have been dismantled 77 years ago. But they kept a first, a second, a third, and a fifth generation of migrants, refugees, to keep the refugee status, not only in Gaza, also in the West Bank, also in Syria, in Jordan, in Lebanon. These people deserve better. They deserve life. The neighboring countries can't take them. This is where they belong. Their identity is Arab. They can fit right in. And today, I don't think Israel can afford keeping this breeding ground close to its borders. I don't think it's fair. Not after October 7. Most people did not see what happened on October 7. I saw it firsthand, and also I'm aware of the culture. And I am with separation because it has been almost a century. And a century can teach you something. If they have been refusing coexistence and they want to continue this fight for 100 years, do you think another 100 years they would come to realize that we have no other choice but to coexist with our neighbors and accept them for their religious and ethnic identity? Or they are going to continue adapt to Islamic ideology that demonizes the Jews, dehumanize them by the name of Palestine, but at the essence it's an Islamic war that has been going on for 14 centuries. Hamas called their attack after Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay, they said Al-Aqsa flood, even though they control the mosque. And that mosque is built on the top of the Jewish temple. And the state of Israel allows them to worship freely and does not allow the Jewish citizens to actually enter the mosque, not to offend the Muslims. When Israel captured Jerusalem after the 1967 war, the Jewish generals handed the keys to the Muslims in a peaceful gesture to tell them, it's yours. We are not here to conquer your religion. But do you think this made the Muslims retreat or understand the peaceful message? No. They have been blaming, and they say that Al-Aqsa Mosque is under occupation, even though the Jews are not allowed to go in. This is the reality. It's a religious war, but from one side only, not from the Jewish side. It's from the Islamic side. And in Islam, there has been no such thing as Palestine. They don't have even a name that describes this land. They call it Bayt al-Maqdis, which means like the holy site. That's the name that the Quran gave it. They don't have a real definition or a name, Islamic name of the land. Yet, it's a property theft. It's identity theft. Palestine is nothing but a replacement of Israel, and Islam is nothing but a replacement to Judaism. If you take all the things that the Muslims and Islam stole from other cultures, from other religions, Islam would be left with nothing. There is nothing original to it. It would go back to an idol buried in the sand of the Arabian desert. This is what Islam. It's all borrowed, stolen from Christianity, stolen from Judaism, stolen from other religions. And the same thing they're doing in India, stealing property, stealing identity. So the world is not understanding this religious dimension of it. And of course, Palestine is a fancy idea. You know, Hamas does not believe in nationalism at all. The Muslim Brotherhood don't believe in nationalism.
So they know it's a fiction.
They know it's a fiction. They don't praise it, but they know that it's a very powerful tool. You know, my father, who was one of the founders of Hamas, used to say, we don't believe in Palestine, we don't believe in political borders. He believes in Islamic Khilafah that sits on the globe, on earth, with one leadership. That's not the Israeli ambition. Israel was very satisfied with a small piece of their historic land. And they were willing to coexist with the Arabs. But is it only the Arabs? Or is it Islam? Is it communism? Is it now the new generation that is now been indoctrinated and radicalized to just hate the Jews? And they don't know why they hate the Jews. They think they are hating the Jews because the Jews killed the children of Gaza, ignoring and denying the responsibility of a society that is reckless when they put children in harm's way. So I don't know how much is going to take to convince such generation. And if they don't want to listen, this is their problem. You know, Israel is a fortress. And nobody can penetrate this. It's a very strong nation with the strongest intelligence, with the strongest army, with the strongest economy, totally independent if the world chooses to sanction Israel. But can we say the same about Europe? Can we say the same about the United States? And today, so many countries have been betraying Israel, stabbing Israel in the back. What is going to be the outcome, and what is the alternative? To sanction the most successful minority with the greatest contribution to life, to civilization, to replace it with what? With those who just want to buy everything. They think everything can be bought by the oil and the gas money. If this is what they want to do, I say just good luck. But for me, this is my birthplace. I recognize the Jewish right in it. It's not a shameful thing. It's not treason. And I am loved here, and I love the people here. And if I have no choice but to stay in this land, then I stay in this land for eternity. I don't need to go anywhere else.
I think what you're saying is Israel, far from being the problem, is actually the solution. Mosab Hassan Yousef, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's 2025. America's debt is over $37 trillion, and the dollar just had its worst crash since 1973. That puts your savings and your family's future at risk. That's why we trust Alpha Omega Gold, a company that stands unapologetically with Israel and supports Stand Tall Israel. Visit ao.gold/stand to claim your free precious metals wayfinder guide or call 1-855-426-4653 today. Protect your future before it's too late.